Good evening. We are in Genesis chapter 28 tonight. That's where we're going to begin. I believe we're going to try and cover 5 chapters. We'll see if I can keep on track with that. But, really, as we're looking at this is going to be the period of time that Jacob spends away from his family, out of the promised land. But he goes that direction as a result of his treachery. His name means he who supplants or ankle grabber, but probably the way we might frame it is cheater. And so he stole, or I guess really he swindled his brother out of his birthright. And then he stole his brother's blessing by deceiving his father. And because of his treachery and cheating in his life, in order to get these blessings and in order to get these things, his brother Esau is angry with him, plotting to kill him. So in order to escape the wrath of his brother Esau, his mother Rebekah devises another plan to send him up north to her family in order to find a wife. So she starts kind of sowing those seeds and complaining about Esau's wives and how if Jacob marries a Canaanite woman, then that's going to kill her or whatever. And she says at the end of chapter 27, "What good would my life be to me if Jacob marries one of these ladies as well?" So she wants to send her favorite son up to her family, but kind of the ulterior motive for that is to get some distance between Jacob and Esau, to allow Esau to cool down a little bit, because he's pretty angry at Jacob. So he stole Esau's blessing. Esau's being vengeful. Something just to note, and this is going to be one of the overarching themes of our study tonight, is God's prophecy about Jacob in Genesis chapter 25, verse 23. It says the older will serve the younger. There's twins being born, and the older will serve the younger. That prophecy would have come true if Jacob just did the right thing. His whole life, he didn't cheat to get it. He didn't steal it from his father. He didn't swindle his way. If he'd have just trusted God and done the right thing through the course of his life, that prophecy still would not have failed. Jacob didn't need to be the guy to go out there and make things happen because he was covetous of this birthright and of these blessings. But that's something to pay attention to, because if we're going to get to a point in this story where Jacob is kind of at a crossroads in his life. He can't go backwards because he's got bad relationships with Laban. He can't go forwards without having to deal with the troubles of his past. And he's at this point of decision. And really, God leads him to that point of decision so he can make up his mind, how am I going to move forward in my life? But the thing that we can learn from it is we can just trust God to provide His promises and do the right thing in our own lives, and God will bring about those promises. We don't have to end up like Jacob in this point where he's burned all his bridges, so to speak. So here we have, in the beginning of chapter 28, Isaac calls Jacob and tells him, look, you need to go take a wife from your mother's relatives. I want you to go up to Padan Aram, to the house of Bethuel, your mother's father, and from there take a wife from the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. Verse 3, may God Almighty bless you and make you fruitful and multiply you, that you become a company of peoples. May He also give you the blessings of Abraham, to you and to your descendants with you, that you may possess the land of your sojournings, which God gave to Abraham. Then Isaac sent Jacob away, and he went away to Padan Aram, to Laban, son of Bethuel, the Aramean, the brother of Rebekah, and the mother of Jacob and Esau. So you see Jacob is sent away with a blessing, and Isaac recognizes Jacob is the one who receives the blessings of Abraham, so he goes ahead and confirms that with Jacob and sends him away. And in verse 6, it's kind of an interesting element to the story. It says, Esau saw that Isaac had blessed Jacob and sent him to get a wife from there. And then saying, you shall not take a wife from the daughters of Canaan, and that Jacob had obeyed his father and his mother and had gone to Paddan Aram. So Esau saw that the daughters of Canaan displeased his father, so Esau went to Ishmael and married. So you see Esau trying to recover, right? He's trying to be pleasing to his father by, okay, I'm not going to marry any of the Canaanite women. I see my father doesn't like that. I will marry one of my father's relatives. So Jacob, he goes up to marry one of his mother's relatives. Esau goes to marry one of his brother's relatives. I don't know if there's some sort of symmetry there in that, but when in Hebrews, where it talks about Esau was unable to regain the blessing even though he sought for it with tears, maybe this was one of those attempts to regain some kind of blessing and good favor from his father from that. But what you do see is Esau being at least a faithful son. And if you compare the two, Isaac said to Esau, go and do this thing, and he went and did the thing. But Jacob dishonored his father in a pretty severe way. I didn't mention it last week, but something that crossed my mind that I kind of was thinking about is in the Old Testament law, there's a law not to put a stumbling block before a blind man or to yell curses at a deaf man. What do you suppose it is when you take advantage of someone who's blind and deceive them to think you're someone you're not? It's putting a stumbling block before a blind. So you just see like the one of the 10 Commandments, honor your father and mother. Jacob didn't honor his father. In the law, don't put a stumbling block before the blind. Here, Jacob puts a stumbling. So you just see Jacob is not the faithful son. Esau is much more the faithful son than Jacob. And yet, because Esau didn't crave spiritual things, he lost access to those spiritual things. And so it kind of just shows the difference between the two. But you see, Esau went and married from Ishmael. And he ended up settling in Edom and Mount Seir, because when Jacob returns, he sends for Esau in Mount Seir. So Esau goes and lives where his father told him to live, in the mountains and in the drier, less fruitful regions. So Jacob goes on his way. He starts heading north, and I just want to take a look here. Here's a map. I don't know how well this is. I guess it shows up okay. But I want to just kind of give us a point of reference so we have a sense of where Jacob is. He starts down here, I think right in this area here. I don't know how well that's showing up. That shows up okay. So he starts down in that area, and he starts traveling north. His goal, I can't see on the map where he stopped. I don't know. Maybe I can zoom it in a little. I don't know if that you get to see it too. Oh, but he stops on the way, and I think I can't remember the spot where they stopped off the top of my head. Beersheba, which would be okay. So Beersheba would be kind of in this area here. So he stops off there and sets up a rock as a pillow. So apparently he was the kind of guy who liked a firm mattress kind of a thing. So he sets up this rock and sleeps on it. As he's sleeping on it, he has this dream. So this is where this is going to take place. But just to kind of get a sense, so where he's actually heading is way up here north. And so if you get a sense of, this is the Holy Land area, from north to south, it's maybe 100 miles or so. So that's a long journey to take by yourself. Maybe he joined a caravan or something, but that's kind of a long path to get all the way up to where Laban is. So that's quite a travel. But he stops on the way, and he has this dream. And in his dream, he sees a stairway going from heaven, or a ladder is what it says, but probably better understood as a stairway. He sees a stairway going from earth to heaven. So let's go ahead and read this. In chapter 28, starting in verse 11, it says, "He came to a certain place and spent the night there because the sun had set. And he took one of the stones of the place and put it under his head and lay down in that place. He had a dream, and behold, a ladder was set on the earth with its top reaching up to heaven. And behold, the angel of God were ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham, the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie, I will give it to you and to your descendants. Your descendants will also be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south. And in you and in your descendants shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Behold, I am with you, and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Then Jacob woke up from his sleep and said, Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. He was afraid and said, How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. So Jacob rose early in the morning and took the stone that he had put under his head and set it up as a pillar and poured oil on its top. And he called the name of the place Bethel. However, previously the city had been named Luz. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, If God will be with me, and will keep me on this journey that I may take, and will give me food to eat and garments to wear, and I return to my father's house in safety, then the Lord will be my God. This stone which I have set up as a pillar will be God's house, and all of that you give me, I will surely give a tenth to you. So here you see Jacob, this vision was impressive to him. And he's like, how awesome is this place? I came to God's house. I didn't even know it. So he named the place Bethel. So here is the pop quiz for you. What was significant about Bethel during the time of the divided kingdom? Yeah, that was where one of the two sites where Jeroboam set up a golden calf to replace temple worship. So, they took this significant event. They probably read this story in the Bible and then decided, okay, that's a good place to set up calf worship, is in Bethel here. Don't travel all the way to Jerusalem, which was only a few miles south, actually. You can stop here in Bethel, or if you're in the north, you can go up to Dan. So they kind of the northern and southern borders of their kingdom, they set up their idols there. So good job, Mike, on that. So Bethel is, Jacob had this dream there. What do we know about this dream? Who's the true beneficiary of the dream that Jacob had, this prophetic vision he has? John?
Well, I don't know exactly what you mean, but I know that Jesus prophesied, or he spoke about it in John chapter 1, where he says, and he said to him, Truly, truly, I say to you, you will see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man.
Yeah, so he was referencing John chapter 1, verse 51, where Jesus is talking with Nathanael, and what he says to Nathanael is, if you heard this and you believed, truly, truly, I say to you, you will see the heavens opened and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man. So Jesus says, I'm the ladder. And really, he references Jacob's dream and says, that was talking about me, and I'm the ladder. I'm the thing where the blessings of God come down on. And if you want access to the blessings of God, where do you need to be? At the bottom of the ladder, right? The house of God. So Jesus identifies that. So who is the beneficiary then? Not the world, Christians. We are the ones that Jacob was dreaming about. In 1 Peter, it talks about how the prophets saw a vision of the future, and they sought what time and what way is this going to be fulfilled? And it was revealed to them that they were serving our generation, is what Peter says. But we are the recipients of this. When we read that, we ought to look at that and say, hey, that's talking about me. And it's fascinating, because how many thousands of years ago did Jacob have this dream? Maybe close to 4,000 years, like 3,800 or something. So it was a long time ago, and yet it was foretelling this period of time when Jesus would be the way God's true blessings come down to earth. And, it's kind of interesting. On the beginning of Jacob's journey, he gets this vision, but he won't quite realize the significance of the spiritual aspect of this vision until this vow is kept. Until he passes by this pillar and establishes that relationship with God, he won't truly understand. But he'll be a changed man when he returns back and fulfills this vow. And another interesting thing that we'll see later down the road is God remembers. 20 years later, God is going to remind Jacob of the oath he took at Bethel. He's like, remember when you set up that pillar? Which I can't imagine. I don't know how big this rock he rested his head on was. It seems like a little guy. That's what I would choose anyway, but maybe it wasn't. I don't know. But regardless, doesn't matter the size of the pillar. It was a little memorial stone for Jacob to remember and to commemorate what happened, but he also swore an oath by it. And God remembers the oath 20 years later and says, okay, Jacob, time to fulfill that vow of yours. I'm going to bring you back. So anyway, I just find that interesting. So in chapter 29 then, in chapter 29, Jacob arrives to Padan Aram. So he gets up there and he gets introduced to Laban and his family. So let's go ahead and take a look in chapter 29. I don't think I want to read the first few verses here, but essentially what happens, he arrives and he sees this well with a big stone lid on it, and everyone's bringing their sheep in, and he's, being an experienced shepherd, kind of is looking around saying, why don't you guys water your sheep and take them out to get them some food? This is not the time of the day to get your sheep in out of the field. And they said, well, the way we work it here is when we get enough people, then we can move the stone and water all these sheep. But the stone was kind of big and unable to move. And so he's like, okay. And then he says, do you know about Laban? Oh yeah, he just lives right up the road. I don't think that's the exact wording, but yeah, he just lives right over here. And he's like, is it well with him? Oh yeah, he's doing fine. In fact, here's Rebekah, his daughter, coming. And as soon as Jacob looks up, he sees Rebekah. His eyes turn into the shape of a heart. And he's like, all right, time to demonstrate a feat of amazing strength. So he lifts the stone by himself, a strong young man, and takes it off the well, waters Rachel's sheep, returns home to go and tells her, I'm your family, and kisses her and, greets her as family, and then they go back to meet Laban. So that's kind of what happens here in this, is that he just meets her, he's impressed with her, and then he goes back to meet Laban. In verse 11 through 20 then, Jacob goes and meets Laban, stays with the family for about a month, and kind of gets to know him, invited into the household and all those things. And finally Laban says, verse 15, Laban said to Jacob, because you're my relative, should you therefore serve me for nothing? Tell me, what shall your wages be? Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah. The name of the younger was Rachel. And Leah's eyes were weak, but Rachel was beautiful in form and face. Now Jacob loved Rachel, so he said, I will serve you 7 years for your younger daughter Rachel. Laban said, it is better that I give her to you than to give her to another man. Stay with me. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to him but a few days because of his love for her. Here's probably the most romantic statement in the Bible, is that 7 years of service was as a few days because of his love for her. He really loved her. In fact, I read somewhere, and I couldn't find it where, and I think, I paid attention. I haven't seen it anywhere else. But this may be the only place in the Old Testament where it says a man loved a woman he wanted to marry. Now there's Song of Solomon where it talks about the way they have affection for each other, but this statement here is a little bit unique in the Old Testament. But I think it's significant. It's one of those things where you see him expressing that, and it's like recorded as one of the impressive, interesting, need-to-know things about this relationship is that he loved her, and 7 years was as nothing. It was no service at all to him. It was no trouble at all, because he loved Rachel so much. There's another place in the New Testament where it does talk about this type of relationship between a man and his wife, and that is in Ephesians chapter 5, in 27 and 28. I just find this kind of an interesting parallel here. You see maybe a foreshadowing of Jesus in this. But look in Genesis chapter 5, starting in verse 28 actually. It says, "So husbands ought to love their own wives as their own bodies. He who loves his own body loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as Christ also does the church, because we are members of his body." And so you really see that this concept of Jacob loving Rachel has a parallel to how Christ loves the church. Now, he loves us so much, and look what he did in order to create the church. In order to make it, what was the cost he had to pay? He had to live a perfect life. He had to condescend from heaven, come all the way down. He had to empty himself completely. He lived his life in a perfectly godly way and then died a brutal, vicious death. That was, in a sense, that was the cost of his, I can't think of the word. What's dowry? That was the cost of Jesus' dowry. That's how he paid for his bride. And he loved us so much it was as nothing. Really, that's the idea of how Jesus loves us and how we as men ought to love our wives. There should be no inconvenience. There should be no complaining, because we're to love our lives. And if you love your wife, you are doing a favor to yourself too. So it's just kind of an interesting element that's added into this story. And it just does show part of Jacob's good character. Basically, he's been nothing but negative up until this point. But here you see a good aspect of him. But then we're going to flip it right around, and we're going to see some negative on him. So, in verse, what do we got here? 21. So he serves his 7 years. He goes to Laban and says, "It's time for me to marry my wife." Laban throws a marriage feast, which is traditionally a 7-day long celebration. And sometime in the middle of that feast, Jacob is given his wife, and so he receives her. There is no ambient lighting, there's no light switches or that sort of a thing. So he receives this wife from Laban, expecting it to be what he asked Laban for. Turns out it was the wrong sister. So, does anyone see irony in this? What was that? Yeah, Rick says a little karma. Yeah, that's exactly right. The Bible doesn't use the word karma, though. What the Bible says is you reap what you sow. And the Lord is teaching him something here. Now, when he woke up in the morning and he saw, hey, this was not the deal I made, it was too late to change direction. When Esau came in to get his blessing from Jacob, and Jacob trembled, like, who was in here before? And he was shaking and trembling and angry. And he said, I blessed the wrong son, but he will be blessed. There's no reversing course from this. I already did it. And so Jacob pretended to be the older when he was the younger and stole the blessing. And now here he wanted to marry the younger, and the older pretended to be the younger to steal the marriage. A little bit of irony there. But now here Jacob is mad, but what can he say? Well, Laban just had a little bit more time and experience as a cheat and weaseled Jacob into marrying Leah. But he's like, hey, no big deal. No big deal. Spend your time with her, and then I will let you marry Rachel as well, and you can serve me another 7 years for that. So everybody wins. Everybody wins. So here Laban takes something from Jacob, and it causes a problem for Jacob. But it really, you see a little bit of reversal of fortune on Jacob, because this is exactly how he got the blessing from Jacob. And so how angry can you really be? It's exactly what he deserved. And the Lord taught him something in this. In addition, the Lord teaches him something else. So in verse 31, and really it goes from 29:31 to 30:24. Oh yeah, here's my little animation of Leah kind of weaseling her way into Jacob's situation. So Genesis chapter 29:31 through 30:24. Here's what we basically have, all Jacob's sons. Which is important because these are the 12 tribes. I guess 11 tribes at this point. We'll have Benjamin later down the road. But these are the 11 tribes of Israel. These are the family that will be God's people. And it starts ugly. Really is, notice in verse 31. It says, "Now the Lord saw Leah was unloved, and he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren." The word here really could be translated hated. Jacob he held a grudge. He did not give her any favor. He did not give her any affection. And it's really a sad story when you start seeing her be the mother of his children. And every child she names, maybe now my husband will love me. Maybe now he'll talk good about me. Maybe now he'll appreciate me. And you really see this heartbreak. She's in a situation. I don't know how much choice she had. Laban may have just made her do it. But now she's in this situation and her husband is mistreating her. Not only is her husband mistreating her, but God looks down and says, "That's not right." And he blesses her. And one of the interesting things about this is Leah is actually the mother of the priesthood and the kings. So those two families, and so she's a mother of Jesus, down the road obviously, but she is the forebearer of Jesus. So that's a pretty significant thing, and yet Jacob doesn't love her. Jacob doesn't appreciate her and treats her wrong. And then you see Rachel being jealous and envious and ugly, and so it starts saying, okay, these people had a child. Then finally, Rachel gives her maiden to her handmaiden to bear children on her knees, is what it's called, basically to be a surrogate mother for her children. So when Bilhah has some children, then Rachel's like, I've been vindicated, I've overcome fighting with my sister, kind of an ugly scenario here. And then Leah stopped having babies, so she gave her maiden Zilpah to marry for Jacob. And so then they started having children. And so what you see here is the dysfunctional family of Jacob. And finally, God had compassion on Rachel and let her bear a child. And it was at the end of the 7 years when Joseph was born. So Jacob's like, all right, time to go home. And Laban then steps in and says, oh, wait a minute, don't go home yet. So let's go ahead and look now in verse 25. But what you really see is Jacob was promised a family. But because of sin, he had a dysfunctional family. And yet, you know what this whole section is really about? God blessed Jacob with a large family. So even though it's being done in a less than ideal way, God is still providing blessings for Jacob. He's not doing the right thing, but that doesn't stop God from blessing him because he said he would. Not because, and you really see this, it's not because God is playing favorites. God's not doing what Jacob is doing. What God is doing is, I'm keeping my promise to you. And I said you would become a large nation, and I'm going to make you a large nation. So you see God keeping his word in this, even though Jacob is being unfaithful. And you see God being a God of compassion toward the downtrodden, which is kind of an important point in this. Remember Hagar? She was abused and cast out, and God went to her and said, no, you go back. and subject yourself because your son is going to be blessed by me. And they were. Eventually she did leave, but Ishmael became the father of 12 princes and was a great family because he was a son of Jacob. And then, so you start seeing these things. God is the God of the downtrodden. And this is actually an interesting aspect to the Old Testament. If you read through it, how many times do you find God noticing people that everyone else forgot about? Hannah is one of those, and she bore Samuel and kept her vow. You see in the Psalms, how often is it that nobody has regard for me? Psalm 22, Jesus is on the cross. He's like, I'm a dog and not a man. I'm a worm. And everyone is casting insults at me, but I know you hear me. So you just see this time and time again. And God, and one of the, I don't remember if it's one of the Psalms or in one of the books of the law, but God says, God is, he's like, I'm a father to the fatherless. And time again, you see that is a quality that God has. And even in this situation, he sees the downtrodden and has mercy on them and does that. So he spends his time. His contract with Laban is done. He decides to leave. In verse 25, it says, Now it came about when Rachel had borne Joseph that Jacob said to Laban, Send me away that I may go to my own place and to my own country. Give me my wives and my children for whom I have served you, and let me depart, for you yourself know the service which I have rendered. But Laban said to him, If now it pleases you, stay with me. I have divined that the Lord has blessed me on your account. He continued, Name me your wages, and I will give it. So here, either this was Jacob's form of negotiation, or it was Jacob's form of wanting to go and Laban's trying to keep him. But what Laban says is, I can tell that because of you, God has blessed me. So I want you to stay for a little while longer. Name your wages. And what Jacob said, I want for my wages is give me all the ugly ones. Give me all the ugly goats, all the ugly sheep. And that will be my wages. I want the striped ones, the speckled ones, the deformed ones. So this is actually a weird looking sheep, but it's actually I think in the Israel area, they're known as Jacob's sheep because they're spotted and ugly. I had a little lamb on there that was a little cuter, but I thought this one was more interesting to look at. So Jacob says, I will take all the ugly ones, and if you come and look at my flocks and you see one that is pure and white and good, just take it back because you know I stole it from you. So I'll just only keep the ugly ones in my flock. And that's what he did. And Laban says, hey, good deal. Like, I only got a couple ugly ones. I don't know. But when you're talking sacrifice, the ugly ones couldn't be used for that. So Laban's thinking, yeah, I'm going to keep my bloodline pure. I'll let him have all the deformed sheep. And that's going to be actually probably work out better for me in the end. And I'm going to have advantage. So if I shear my sheep, everyone wants white clothing. They're not going to want white and brown clothing. So the wool is going to be worth more. So Laban's getting a sweet deal on this. And plus, Jacob is a great farmhand at running his business. So he's thinking, I'm going to win and all these things. I find it interesting. I don't know if this is really a direct correlation with Jesus, but I do think it's an interesting thought. Of all the people on earth, what did Jesus take as his wages? The striped, the spotted, the ones with trouble, right? The poor. When Jesus didn't take the best. He didn't say, give me the kings, give me anyone with money, give me anyone who's genius, their IQ's over this point, and start naming off the very best of the best and say, those are the ones I want serving me. Now, he ends up getting people like that. But what Jesus says is, I'll take the ones that are spoiled with sin, but are willing to acknowledge it. That will be my wages. I think it's kind of just an interesting parallel here between what was Jesus satisfied with in us. Because he didn't take the perfect and best. He took the troubled and said, I will bring them in. I will make them my sheep, my people. So Jacob starts this deal, and what ends up happening is, and it's kind of a strange way of doing it. I don't think this is like general shepherd practice, but he takes some sticks and carves stripes on them. So I just took the barbershop pole because you shear your sheep, and so maybe there's something to that. I don't know, but he basically took these striped sticks, and when it was breeding season, the sheep that were the strongest and the speckled and all that, he would breed them in front of these sticks. And when he did that, they would have better, more healthy, more prolific babies. And so his sheep increased, and God blessed him in that. It's kind of an interesting thing because on a way it seems superstitious in a sense. But God allowed Jacob to be blessed through that. And it was kind of, in a sense, it's name your blessing. God said, okay, Jacob, I'll bless you. So tell me how you want to be blessed. And this was the way Jacob told God how he wanted to be blessed, and God went along with it. Later on, God will mention, this is what I did for you. When you put up those sticks, I allowed those sheep to breed. So Jacob attributes it to God, so it's not superstition in that. God says, I answered your request, because really that's what the sticks were. They were Jacob requesting to God to make his flocks abundant. And that's what happened. And so what you really see is God responding to Jacob, letting him choose the way that he's going to be blessed. Mike?
What also took place before that is Laban, as soon as he made that deal with Jacob, he took all the spotted and striped sheep out of the flock and sent them around through, I think it says about 3 miles away or 3 days travel.
Well, that's what Jacob did, is he took them out and brought his a 3 days journey.
It says Laban. It says, but that day Laban removed the male goats that were striped and spotted, and all the female goats that were speckled and spotted, and every one that had white on it, every lamb had black, put them in charge of his sons, and he set them a distance of 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob pastured the rest of his flock. So it was like the way I'm understanding that is Laban is trying to cheat him again. There's not going to be anything for you to start with.
Yeah, so mine reads slightly different, but the impression I get from reading it is that those were Jacob's that were separated off, not Laban trying to hide them. But that was just, or Laban, not Laban. But maybe that's the case. I haven't read it that way, but sometimes, mine just says, Laban said, good, let it be according to your word. And then it says, so he removed that day the striped. And so I don't know if Jacob did it or Laban did it. I always assumed it was Jacob, but maybe I would have to look into that a little more. But either way, regardless of that, God was able to bless Jacob. Yes. Yeah. So it says, and he put a distance of 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob fed the rest of Laban's stock. So yeah, I'm not sure on that. I hadn't thought of it from that way, of Laban trying to work him over right there. So I'll have to relook at that. Either way, so God blesses Jacob and provides for him wealth. So that's really what you're seeing in this section, is God is providing Jacob with wealth as he's breeding these sheep for Laban. So in this, we can see maybe a lesson for us. Is Jacob knew God was going to bless him. So the sticks were a mechanism to ask God to provide help. He said when the strong ones were breeding, he would put the sticks up. When the speckled ones were breeding, he would put them up. So he would get more and Laban would get less. So that was Jacob's way of asking God, bless me right now. But he was also asking according to God's promise. It wasn't like he was asking for something God never said he could have. He was asking according to God's promise. And the way he asked was a bold way of asking. He was saying specifically, right now do it. Right now bless me in this particular way. But I think this can be an encouragement for us to have boldness when we pray, but not just boldness in praying for anything, particularly boldness in praying for the promises that God said he would give to us. God said that he says, pray to me and I will prosper you, but in the sense of, I will prosper you through the growth of the church. I will prosper you with a family that loves you more than your blood relatives. So that's something we could pray about. And it would be according to God's will, and we can pray with boldness on that. We could pray to God for abundant opportunities to teach the gospel. That's according to his will. We could pray to God for close relationships we serve God with. So if you need good friends, if you need close relationships, ask God for that. He said that I will provide those things for you. We can pray for confidence for God to provide us everything we need to serve him. And we can move forward and serve him with confidence because we know he answers those prayers. We can pray with confidence for wisdom. In James 1, it says, ask God for wisdom, who gives to all generously and without reproach, and he'll give it to you. So pray to God for wisdom, and he will bless you with wisdom. Pray for God for teaching, for understanding. Pray that you will understand his will and what he wants in your life and how he can use you. We can pray for a leadership. God said in the church that he gave us leaders, and we can pray for them and also pray to have them. We can pray for peace. We can pray for forgiveness. We can pray for eternal life and have confidence that God will provide those things. So, Jacob prayed along the lines of what God said he would give to him, he would provide for him. And we can do the same thing with the same boldness. I think that's just something you can learn from this, is you kind of get to see the behind the scenes of how God is working for Jacob, but by extension, this is how God works for all his people. And so we can ask God with the same sort of boldness as Jacob did. So now let's go ahead and take a look any thoughts or comments on that, Becky?
Must have missed the part where did Jacob pray that God would bless?
So he wasn't praying, he was putting up sticks. But that was his way of requesting of God, bless me in this way at this time. But it's a specific request of God with those sticks. And so I was just making the correlation between him asking God for his blessing that he said he would give, and us asking the same with the same boldness, even though not necessarily the same way.
His worship at Bethel, that's really where he was originally had asked the blessing of God. And then the sticks were the method of the mechanism, like you said.
Yeah, it was his way of saying, this is the blessing I'm asking for now. Let's go ahead and take a look now does that help? Does that answer your question, Becky? Okay. So it's kind of a kind of what he was doing with the sticks is, yeah. All right. In 31, what we get into is Jacob is going to return to his father's house. So he is We'll go and take a look at 31 here. It says, now Jacob heard the words of Laban's sons, saying, Jacob has taken away all that was our father's, and from what belonged to our father, he has made all of his wealth. So here's the first thing, is Laban's sons are complaining, look at what Jacob's taken from us. So he's increasing and Laban is decreasing probably. So they're a little bit angry at Jacob for that. Verse 2. Jacob saw the attitude of Laban, and behold, it was not friendly toward him as formerly. So Laban is also, he's saying, okay, look, they're not happy to have me here anymore. Verse 3, then the Lord said to Jacob, return to the land of your fathers and to your relatives, so I will be with you. So here you see God reaching. So there's three reasons why Jacob left. 1, Laban's sons. 2, Laban. And 3, God said it's time to go. So those 3 things were kind of the determining factors. He already saw his welcome wearing out. God appealed to him, and he went. If we jump forward a little bit to verse 6, here is him explaining the dream he had to his wives. So verse 6, it says, you know that, well, hold on a minute, maybe verse 9, verse 11. So we'll jump forward to verse 11. It says, "Then the angel of God said to me in a dream, 'Jacob,' and I said, 'Here I am.' He said, 'Lift up now your eyes and see that all the male goats which are mating are striped, speckled, and mottled. For I have seen all Laban has been doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar, where you made a vow to me. Now arise, leave this land, and return to the land of your birth.'" So here you see God mention a few things. He's like, I've caused your sheep to be prolific. I have been your God. Remember what you said. I did it. Now it's time for you to return and keep your vow. And it's interesting that verse 13, he says, "I am the God of Bethel." Where Jacob said, God is in this place, so I'm going to name the place Bethel. And then God said, "I'll take that name. You're calling me your God, I'll let you call. I'm the God of Bethel. I'm that God, and I have been with you, and now it's time for you to return." So you see Jacob being willing, very similar actually, if you think about when did Abram leave Haran, and why did he leave Haran? It was because God appeared to him and said, "All right, time for you to move to this land I'm going to tell you about. It's the land I promised to you." And here God is doing the same thing. So after this promise, he lays out some charges against Laban, but we won't talk about that. And he talks to his wives, and his wives say, "Our father has used up whatever dowry you offered to him, and now he's looking to take what we would leave for our children away from us. So it's a good time to go. Let's go ahead and do what God said to do." So he decides to head out of town, and while Laban is out shearing his flocks, so presumably the house is empty, Rachel sneaks in, steals Laban's house gods, and puts them in with her stuff, and so they leave. Starting in verse 22, so Jacob gets a 3-day head start. Laban pursues him. I think it's a 3-day head start, on the third day. So Laban starts pursuing him. Look at chapter 31, verse 24. "God came to Laban the Aramean in a dream of the night and said to him, 'Be careful what you do. Be careful that you do not speak to Jacob, either good or bad.'" So Laban is pursuing Jacob, thinking, I'm going to kill him and take all that stuff that belonged to me that he left with. And you'll see that sentiment reflected. He's like, "Those are my daughters, those are my children, those are my sheep. Everything you have is mine. But God said I can't do anything to you, so I got to let you go. But just know that I get to take credit for all of that." So Laban goes on with that. And then let's go ahead in verse 29. Here's what Laban says, "And it is my power to do you harm, but God, your father, spoke to me last night, saying, 'Be careful, do not speak to Jacob, good or bad.' Now you have indeed gone away because you long greatly for your father's house, but why did you steal my gods?" Then Jacob replied to Laban, "Because I was afraid, and I thought that you would take your daughters from me by force." So there Jacob says, "I left in this way because I was afraid." So you saw that there was an element of fear in there too. And then God allowed, the idols aren't found. So although there was something stolen from Laban, they're not found. Rachel weasels this time and is able to effectively hide them. So Laban can't find what he's looking for. So Jacob's like, "Bring out what you found. You're making these accusations. What is it that you found that belongs to you?" And he's like, "Well, there's nothing." And so in verse 38, he's like, "These 20 years I have been with you. Your ewes and your female goats have not miscarried, nor have I eaten the rams of your flocks. That which was torn of a beast I did not bring to you. I bore the loss of it myself. You required it of my hand, whether stolen by day or by night. Thus I was. By day the heat consumed me, and the frost by night. And my sleep fled from my eyes. These 20 years I have been in your house. I have served you 14 years for 2 of your daughters and 6 years for your flock, and you changed my wages 10 times. if the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had not been for me, surely now you would have sent me away empty-handed. God has seen my affliction and the toil of my hands, so he has rendered judgment last night." So what God said to Laban, Jacob recognizes as God was protecting me and rendering judgment on your unfair treatment of me. So you really see Jacob kind of coming full circle and realizing justice is a good thing. Good to treat people right. So now Jacob finds himself in a bad position. So because he can't move forward. So what ends up happening? He and Laban make peace. They make this pile of rocks they call the heap of witness. And so that's the witness that Laban won't pass that heap to do Jacob harm, and Jacob won't pass that heap to do Laban harm. They're at peace. And so Laban also says, "Don't marry anybody else but my daughters. If you do, God's going to be a witness between us." So he makes Jacob not take any more wives as part of that deal. Verse 32, now Jacob has his next problem. He's leaving for fear of Laban, for fear of what Laban's going to do to him. And he gets to this point. Now he's going to move forward. And he can't move forward for fear of the sins of his past. They're going to come back and haunt him. Esau wanted to kill him 20 years ago. And there's no reason for Esau to have changed his mind. In fact, Esau has become a strong company of warriors, it seems like. So Jacob now has this next problem to deal with. So he sends out messengers and just lets Esau know, "Hey, I'm coming. I want to let you know it's I'm not coming. I just let him know." And the messengers come back and says, "Yeah, Esau was real excited to hear that you're coming. He left here to greet you with 400 men." That seems like a bad situation. Likely Esau was angry. So Jacob, look in verse 9. Jacob says, "O God, my father, O God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, O Lord, who said to me, 'Return to your country and to your relatives, and I will prosper you.' I am unworthy of all the loving kindness and of all the faithfulness which you have shown your servant. For with my staff only I crossed this Jordan, and now I have become two companies. Deliver me, I pray, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, that he will come and attack me and the mothers with the children. For you said, I will surely prosper you and make your descendants as the sand of the sea, which is too great to be numbered." So he spent the night there. Then he selected from what he had as a present for his brother Esau. So here you see Jacob and a sincere prayer. Look at the way he acknowledges God. When he left, he's like, "Okay, I know you're at this spot, so here's the deal I'll make for you. Here's the deal I'll make for you. If you bless me, if you make sure I come back okay, then I'll consider making you my God." Like, it's a very proud way, even though he was making an oath, but it was not a humble oath. Where here now you see Jacob saying, "You're all I have. The only reason I made it out of there alive and okay is because you blessed me. I crossed the Jordan River with just my staff. And now look at this company of people that's returning 20 years later, and it's all because of you. I'm unworthy of your loving kindness. I'm unworthy of your goodness. And you said that I would become like the sands of the shore, so please protect me now. I have to go face the mistakes of my youth, and I'm afraid how it's going to turn out." So you really see this kind, loving appeal to God. You see his faith has grown to this point. But he doesn't just pray. And this is actually an important thing. He prays, and then the next day he's like, "How will I win over Esau's affection? I'm going to send all these gifts, but we're going to separate them out. So when he arrives, he's going to see this. Who do you belong to? Oh, I belong to your brother Jacob. Here's a gift for you. He's behind us." He goes a little further. "Hey, what's all these camels? Oh, all these camels are from your brother Jacob. He's just behind us. So what are all these donkeys?" Well, so he's getting gift after gift after gift as they're moving ahead. And in the same time, Jacob divides his company. So if he attacks one, the other will escape. So he's there's two things that are happening. One, he prays, and two, he takes action. That's an important thing for us to remember for our own lives. It's important for us to pray, but it's just as important for us to move forward and take action. God doesn't expect us to just pray and sit and do nothing and hope it gets better. That's not what God wants from us. He wants for us to pray, but also to take action. There's a couple of scriptures I had to talk about this, but one of them, Romans chapter 12, 17 through 21. I won't read it now because we're actually past our time, but what it says is, inasmuch as it depends on you, be at peace with all men. Do what you can to create peace. And the other part of it is trust in God and serve Him. But here's what Jacob is doing. He's trying to make right what went wrong in his past, but he's also turning to God, asking for peace. So he's doing both. He's doing what he can at a great expense to himself, and yet he's trying to honor his brother. I think we'll go ahead and stop right here. We almost made our mark to get to the end of 32, but this is a good place to start. Next week we'll talk about Jacob wrestling with an angel, and the angel needing to resort to trickery to stop him from wrestling. So we'll go and pick up there tomorrow. Any thoughts or comments before we close for tonight? If not, let's end with a word of prayer.